Welcome to Empower and Evolve, and I'm your host, Dunstan, and thanks for coming into today's episode. Now, this podcast is designed for those looking to break free from stagnation and enhance their well-being through actionable insights and inspiring stories. So you'd never miss an episode, hit that follow button and follow us through our social media accounts. Now, if you find value in our discussions, consider sharing this podcast with friends who you think might benefit listening today. Now let's get started on this journey of empowerment and transformation. Hi, Done here, and thanks for coming back to Empower and Evolve. Now, for our first episode, I'd like to think about the past year, right? And something that I want to take out of that first year is all of the criticisms and feedback that I received, right? Imagine like this. If you guys are familiar with circuses, there's a room called Hall of Mirrors. And when you go into that room, there's a lot of mirrors. When you look at every mirror that's inside, you get different perspectives. You may look taller, you may look shorter, you may have a big head, or you may have your body's gonna be really, really wide, right? But when you think about that, the mirror are just a reflection of you based on how they see things, how they're tuned to see things. Whether they're concave, they're convex, they're oddly shaped or high or bent one way or another. That's because of how the mirror was made. It gives off a different reflection of who you are. And when you think about that concept of who you are, they have their own perspectives, but yourself, you know your worth, right? And for today's episode, I'd like to dive a little bit about that perspective and your worth. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you can build a process to manage it. Because, honest to goodness, we can't stop anyone from giving their perspectives, right? Giving their criticisms, right? So, without further ado, let's dive in, all right? So, real talk, right? People get offended with criticisms or feedback, right? Because it affects their pride. When you think about that, let's say I know I've been passionate about this podcast. And I'll be honest, right? I'll be very vulnerable and honest that I've had detractors along the way saying that, hey, you should stop doing that. No one's listening. Or it's just going to be something you're going to do for a few months. You won't even complete 1 year of your podcast. It hurts my pride because, I have my reasons why I wanted to do this. And it's not for any other reason and not for any other person to judge why am I doing it. The passion that I put into this, right? And whether they are just really being honest, whether they're pessimistic, the person that's giving the feedback, and this is how I'm processing it, right? I need to understand what's their background, what's their personality. Do they even have prior experiences that led them to bring into that criticism up front? And at least, and I'm thankful that they were very frank and honest with me, and they didn't keep that feedback and that comment to themselves. On the other side of things, of course, I've also received feedback and criticism from people who was on the other end of the spectrum. Like, hey, I love your content. I was listening to it. I was able to pick up a few things that I think I can use on my daily life. And mind you, whether they're my friends or an unknown listener of this podcast, it also affects my pride, right? That I feel good that, hey, I was able to do what I intended to do. And when you think about that perspective, I mean, these are two criticisms from both ends of the spectrum. They're one is kind of negative, one is on the positive side. But just like I mentioned, both can affect my pride. Why? Because the pride that we have, if you look at it in a negative sense, it's your defensive approach when you want to respond to that, to what they said. If it's especially if it's on the negative side. Now, as you are being proud of what you have achieved, pride now puts you more engaged. It fuels that passion to be more active. You put the right effort, if not put 110% effort of what you do with the content that you do or the things that you're doing. Right? So when you start thinking about criticisms now, yes, number one, and first and foremost, criticisms can affect you personally. You know, it can pull you down or pull you up. And we have to understand that we have to learn to take things with a grain of salt. Now, how do we do that? Well, just a few things, right? When I think about the process of being able to take care and handle criticisms in both ends of the spectrum, right? I have to understand first, why do they want to say it? What's their intent? Do I know this person personally? Right? Do I know their prior experiences? Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe I don't know. Right? But thinking about the more negative and the more destructive criticism, I want you guys and I want everyone listening to or watching this content, first is learning how to shift your perspectives. Right? Instead of viewing the criticism as a personal attack, consider it as an opportunity to grow. So, how do I do that? You ask yourself, what can I learn from this? So, looking at my example earlier of someone saying, you know, you're not going to last 1 year or you don't have the right skills. So, I learn now I need to hone my skills to be better when I make my content. I need to conquer my fear of the microphone, and more so, like for year 2, learning to conquer the fear of the camera. Right? And when you start shifting your perspective, and I always say this in the first year, right? You have to be able to practice gratitude. Now, you have to thank the person for giving the feedback, whether it's on the positive or the negative side. Because the simple act can help you detach emotionally. And you can start looking at the situation more objectively. So when I say detaching your emotions and looking at objectively, there are two things to take into consideration when you're trying to receive feedback, right? You have to understand what is the emotion involved. And me being a communication major, there's a very simple formula that we follow. Who's the source? What's the message? What's the channel? And what was the effect of that message? So it's an SMCRE. If you want to add more layers, you add respond or receiver and then feedback. So it's a full loop. And when you think about those things, I mean, there are so many things that you want to add into that layer, where that you can add that experience, you can add that perspective, you can add their background, their ethnicity, their religion, and every other aspect that you can put into that person who gave you that message. If you try to start detaching the emotion and just drill down to the facts, you can now take it more objectively. Second, learn to pause before responding, right? Especially if it really hits the spot, where it's really, it's very painful. Your pride's really being stepped on. Take a deep breath. Because if you start responding with high emotions, chances are you're not going to be responding to the best way possible, right? Um, you want to be able to stop, look, and listen. Something I mentioned in the first year, right? You stop first, look at what was said, understand what was said, and then listen to your heart how you want to respond to it, right? Now, if very simple trick, learning counting 1 to 10. I mean, as kids, we learn to do that, right? If another way is maybe try to cringe a part of your body that's not visible to the other person. Normally, I do that with my toes because I usually wear shoes, right, in public. So instead of of another person seeing me, clench my fist or make a frowning facial expression, I just cringe my toes while I'm pausing, while I'm trying to compose myself before I respond. Now, third, learn to seek clarification, especially if the feedback is very vague, if it's just a very general feedback. So maybe you could ask, so what can you share me an instance wherein I was able to do an action that led you to give this feedback? So it's a form of validation, right? You validate that because it could just be something that they just conjured in their head as an assumption. But if they start giving you actual scenarios that actually is true, actually happened, and you yourself, that the date, the time, the location, what was said, what was done, then you can now move towards an objective approach, right? And of course, while they're giving the clarification, of course you have to thank them because it helps you to understand the situation better. Fourth, and a lot of people is going to have some difficulty on this because you need to learn to separate yourself from your work. Especially in my case. Like I told you guys, this is a passion project. And of course, any criticism I receive here at Empower and Evolve hits me in the heart, right? Because it's my passion. But I have to remember that my work is different from who I am outside the camera, outside the microphone. My friends, my family member who knows me more than a random listener can stand and tell them, hey, what you're telling is wrong, what your assumption is wrong, and so on and so forth. But of course, I don't have that person standing behind me when I receive that feedback or when I get that feedback or I get that criticism. But I have to be able to stand and put myself behind that feedback. And the person that's receiving the feedback is just the host of Empower and Evolve, not Dunstan. Right? It's hard. It's hard, especially if you're really passionate about what you're doing. Right? And always remember that you are enough. Right? You have the courage to do what you do. You have the courage to even take the first step, while most people won't even dare take the first step. Or for those who have taken the second step, kudos to you guys because you've taken beyond the first step. You're on your journey already. And regardless if you get criticisms left and right, remember, you are more than enough. You are doing what you need to do to become a better version of yourself. Fifth, right? Let's say, and this is just real talk, right? Let's say the feedback, the criticism that you receive is real, is accurate, is correct, and is true, right? Learn to apologize. If it's a mistake and it offended someone or it caused trouble to someone or a few people, then be brave enough and use your pride to fuel up yourself and muster that energy to say sorry. I mean, saying sorry is very difficult, but when you think about that, it's one of the few strongest phrases a person could ever say that can connect automatically with another person. Right? Sixth is being able to create an action plan, especially if it's impacting the people that matters to you the most. Right? you have to devise a way to make sure to try to minimize, if not completely eradicate, the error or the problem that arose from that criticism, right? You have to set goals, set timelines, make sure there's a check and balance. Make sure there's checkpoints that you can do within that time frame when you're trying to do the action plan. And lastly, surround yourself with the right people. Because a change, a feedback, especially if it's on the negative side, it hurts. And some people may not be able to take it lightly. Some people may be able to learn to take it gracefully, so to speak. But if you have your supportive people, if you have your family, your friends, your fans, right, who surrounds you and gives you that support in whatever action you're doing with your action plan, or understands you better than a random stranger outside the street, right? They will tell you that you are enough. What you're doing is right. You cannot please everyone, and remember this one. I mean, maybe it's someone I've read this somewhere, or maybe this is my own version of this quote, but the gist of it is, you can please some, but you can't please most. You can please most, but you cannot please everyone. So, whether we like it or not, criticism will always be there. Detractors will always be there. But remember, if you know what you're doing is right, if your moral compass is telling you that you're on the right path towards a better version of yourself, or towards something better, something positive, take the grain of salt. Understand what the feedback is all about. Take it objectively. Be graceful and show gratitude because someone had the strength to even give you that criticism, whether it's valid or not, whether it's true or not. And pick up lessons from there. Internalize, meditate, have that self-actualization process. Because by being able to take the criticism in a mature way, because you know yourself better than anyone else, you know that you are on your way to become a better version of you. So with that, thank you so much for watching and listening to today's episode. And remember, here at Empower and Evolve, our goal is to help you become a better version of you. Stay safe. Take care. Catch you next week. Bye for now. Hey buddy, thank you for joining us on this transformative journey of empowerment and growth. Now remember, it's not just about evolving. It's about embracing that incredible power within you to become the best version of yourself. Keep striving for greatness, because together, we can create a world where empowerment knows no bounds. And if you find value in today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with someone who could use that little inspiration. Until next time, stay empowered, stay inspired, and keep shining brightly on your path to evolution. With Empower and Evolve, you have the tools to unleash your potential and rewrite your story. Let's continue to evolve together.